They sought to answer 3 questions in this study. The phase 1 question addressed, have nurses been more represented in the media from 1997 till today? We already answered that. The answer is no. The second question they needed to answer was, what were the barriers to journalists using nurses as healthcare experts and sources? And then these are some of the barriers that were identified. First, there was barriers keeping nurses from journalists, and then there were barriers keeping journalists from nurses. The barriers keeping journalists from nurses were that journalists didn't fully understand the range of nurses' roles, work, and education. I'm reading this as a direct quote. The second was that journalists often don't know how to find nurses to interview, and they have limited time to track them down. And then the third thing was that there were editorial biases, policies, and processes that got in the way of using nurses as sources. These editorial biases came from even the way that they addressed the source. So for instance, if the source was a nurse, they were not allowed to say RN. They weren't allowed to, based on their editorial style, they weren't allowed to use the designation RN beside the nurse's name. So there could have been more nurses, but they were just sort of quoted as maybe in their administrative position. And then the second piece being that they don't know how to find nurses. I think that's a nursing related issue where, I'm thinking to myself, well, we need to have some kind of a body. There's a body, I don't know who told me about this, but it's called She Source, where they have put together a group of women who are experts in so many different fields. And so if there was ever a time when a story needed to be told, they could pick on one of them. It could be, somebody that is a politician. It could be a cardiologist. It could be anything, police officer, whatever. But it's just a group of women because they're really trying to get women's voices in the media. So they were like, we would welcome nurses to participate in this initiative. And so I think that it would be great if nurses maybe had their own body where we're all nurses there, but then there's a nurse who specializes in dermatology, one who's in pediatrics, one, all kinds of different public health, community health nursing. And then whenever, it would specifically be a group who's focused on media engagement. And then if there was ever something where journalists needed somebody to give an expert opinion in a pinch, we would, because they're always on deadline. So we would be readily available. And then the first one was that journalists don't fully understand what nurses do.